Hey everybody, this is Marcel. If I sound a little weird today, I've got a storm going outside and I'm trying to reduce the background noise as much as I can. For today I want to discuss some of the situations that I've been in that a strong sixth sense, if you want to call it that, maybe just a good instinct, a gut feeling, has saved me through what could have actually wound up being some pretty serious things. So I'm going to share a few stories with you, pull up a chair and take a trip down memory lane. When I was young, my brother and I used to frequently go swimming in a river that flowed not too far behind our house. It didn't always flow at the same level. Sometimes it was nothing but a trickle, and other times it was a huge roaring flood. It kind of depended on how wet the season was. Well, during that week, it had been raining hard. The water was high, and there was a section of the river that allowed for a giant pool to form. It was caused by about a 10-foot cliff edge that had a culvert, kind of a big metal tube. The water coming through it had that distance to carve out the rocks below. It was almost scenically beautiful. During that month, my brother and I had swam in that water probably 6 or 7 times. It was a good year for it. I had gotten dressed and proceeded to the water's edge, same as any other day. Though for some reason, when I made contact with the water, even just barely, my face went white. I turned to my brother, who kept asking me, "Marcel, what's wrong?" I made my way behind that huge metal tube, up high, amongst a patch of brush-like trees that had formed where the water pooled above, many of which had been knocked down. There, floating in the water just beyond the metal, beyond the view from down below, was a dead, decomposing goat. Its flesh had been partially torn away, and it had been left out in the sun for several days, perhaps, to get to the state that it was then. I don't know how I was able to sense it. The fact that something was off, something was wrong. It almost felt like electricity hitting me as soon as I made contact with the water. Perhaps it was sixth sense, perhaps it was more just a heightened sense of awareness. My body picked up on something that the conscious side of me had long since lost the ability to detect. It's hard to say. I found out later that a pack of wolves had killed it. There's no telling what would have happened if I had swam in that water below. Perhaps nothing. Maybe I would have been fine. Nonetheless, it's something of a scary thought. Fast forward many years later, I lived in a small, quiet town. There were not many jobs available in the area, at least none that paid, so I had to drive a great distance just to make a living. It was cold, middle of winter. Sheets of snow had fallen the night before, and the area was coated in a thick, hazy frost. My old pickup truck, being outside of any form of garage or protection, had taken the brunt of it. It was nearing 5 a.m. The sun hadn't risen. The layers of ice on my windshield wouldn't scrape off with a knife, as they were far too thick and solid. I could have waited for the truck to idle, given it time to warm up, but I would have been late for work. I made a dangerous decision that day, but it had not been the first time I did it. With the thick layer of ice on my windshield, I proceeded to drive to work, essentially blind to the world around me. When I got to the edge of the street corner, I stopped. I don't know why I did it. My movements were almost involuntary. I rolled down my window, allowing the frigid cold to blow inside the truck, and stuck my head outside. There, laying on the ground not 30 feet from me, was a young woman and her friend. While her accomplice watched, surely hoping to soon become a witness, she had laid down directly in the middle of the road, waiting for me to drive forward. I was stunned. The young woman wasn't even facing the truck. She had accepted that I was going to pull forward and not see her. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised to see someone standing there holding a stick to fake a broken limb, but to lay down in the middle of the road and look away. I sat there for a few moments, truck idling, before she finally turned to see that I was staring at her, got up, walked over to her friend, and they walked away without saying a word. I can't explain what caused me to behave the way I did that day. It was a foolish mistake driving like that I never repeated, but nonetheless, I was blind. There is no way I could have known that woman was there. I was essentially driving out of my side windows. Moving forward, there was a time when I came into a truck stop. I want to say in my early 20s. While waiting in line to use said restroom, I was approached by a gentleman that I'd never met before. In essence, a stranger. He greeted me, though through the corner of my eye I could sense that he was leering at me. A very focused stare. His words were something casual, like, "How are you doing today?" But the tone behind them felt off. The sharpness of his voice caught me off guard and felt out of place. My mouth went dry. I'm doing good, thank you. You know, when you gotta take a dump. I was so thrown off by the interaction, I went straight up to one of the urinals and nervously started fussing with my pants. The same man walked directly up to my side and, far too close for comfort, said in an ice-cold voice, "I thought you said you needed to dump." Chills ran up my spine. I couldn't speak, I couldn't think, I froze. His comment to some may have seemed playful, but behind it, the undertone was something very primal. I don't know if it was hatred or anger, or perhaps he was just toying with me. Regardless of what his intentions were, as someone who has been to combat, been knowingly attacked by those who honestly wanted to kill me, that scared me. I have no way of knowing to this day what was behind that man's hollow, focused eyes, what his intentions really were, but I experienced less fear staring down the barrel of a gun pointed at me. So why am I sharing these stories? What's the point in this video? Gentlemen, we all have an inherent sixth sense. We have the ability to detect something is off, when it's wrong. It's ingrained into every living thing's DNA, the deep-rooted will to survive. I am happy to say that most of the time that I experienced a gut feeling about anything that was going on around me, I listened to it and was rarely disappointed in the outcome. Far more often than not, it saved me. Sometimes it can be difficult to separate what is a sensory perception and what is my own emotions toying with me, especially considering that I tend to be very logical in the way I approach things. Though you want to know one situation where I always tended to not listen to my gut unless it was screaming at me, metaphorically of course, when I was dealing with women. If anybody couldn't guess that already. There are a lot of things that can deaden our senses, that can make us choose poorly, have crappy judgment. Sure, you got things like alcohol, drugs, perhaps external stimuli. There's even the influence of culture and society, past experiences that roll together and cause someone to become oversensitive or even complacent, perhaps the other side of the spectrum. There's 1,001 reasons why a person would be distracted and not pay attention to their surroundings, to what's really happening behind the scenes, behind the shadows. Though I, for one, do believe that that ability is still there in all of us. Regardless of if a person is religious, for example, perhaps those feelings come from a higher power. Maybe they're atheist. Well, then clearly my body was able to smell the blood in the water at the river. Maybe I picked up movement through that thick ice on the windshield. There have been a lot more experiences, things that I have seen myself that prove to me at least, we all have the capability to tap into more potential than surface level interactions. Day-to-day perception. We've just grown soft with society protecting us. So like a vestigial limb left over, a remnant from times past, this skill, the ability has grown weak, but not completely absent. I am trying to work into ways to really recognize and access that ability, but it's a work in progress. Society is extremely noisy and distracting. It's almost like trying to hear a whisper on the other side of a room in the middle of a concert. I've been working with trying to filter out my surface level emotions when I'm dealing with something. Not how I feel about it at the time, but after I calm myself down, breathe and try and focus on the whole situation, the big picture, and what my gut is really trying to tell me about what is happening. Then if I pick up on a sense of wrongness, perhaps I'm not meant to be in that area at that time. I try to feel out the wrongness if it should be there. These days, if my senses are telling me that I should leave, I do. In the past, if I had listened to my gut instinct whenever I had felt like I was, for example, in a bad relationship, that something was wrong, if I had only listened, the years of pain that it would have saved me, the mistakes I would have never made, though I've already spoken about that too much in my last few videos. I think we're getting a lot closer. We're getting closer to the truth every day. With enough time, energy, maybe even patience, we'll come up with some really great answers. What I would take from all of this, when something starts to feel off about any situation, stop, assuming of course that your life is not in immediate danger. Don't react, especially not on the current emotions being felt, but rather pull back for a moment. Sense through the situation rather than just feeling about it. And if your gut starts to tell you that you shouldn't be there, maybe it's time to walk away. Always remember, gentlemen, nothing is worth your sanity or your life. So tell me down below, have you ever experienced anything like I have? Witnessed things that you couldn't imagine would have been possible? If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to hear more. Until next time, this has been Marcel.